And he was so convinced about the philosophy that within a year he moved to the temple, and he got initiated by Srila Prabhupada in the spring of 1977. Haribol! All right. I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, Prabhuji, that despite your super hectic schedule, that you have been able to make it and you are with us. It is very, very special for us. We are really touched by your gesture for coming and joining us despite your super hectic schedule. Like Prabhuji is literally catching multiple flights within a week, and he's traveling all 50 states of US, multiple cities within a state, and he's like super busy. So thank you so much, Prabhuji. And just a little bit about Prabhuji, because I know most of us already know about Prabhuji, but for the people who are joining us for the first time, who are going to hear Prabhuji for the first time, he is actually known as the spiritual scientist in our spiritual community. He travels all over the world from Australia to America, and he has given talk on spiritual subject matters in very deemed universities like Princeton, Stanford, Yale, Cambridge, and companies such as Intel, Microsoft, Salesforce, Google, as well as at TEDx. So seeing the prevalent problems of stress, depression, addiction, and overall misdirection, all caused by a lack of spirituality, he felt inspired to dedicate his life to the cause of sharing the spiritual wisdom of Bhagavad Gita all over the world. So I really want to welcome Prabhuji with a very loud Haribol! Thank you very much. So without further ado, I would like Prabhuji, please take over. Thank you so much.
Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Vitinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshakarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Is the projector on?
Yes.
But we have to turn off the lights.
So I'll speak based on the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, text 5. This talks about how we can manage our mind. The topic today was recreating our mind. I'll talk about 4 features of the mind and how that can help us manage the mind better. As I recreate, what that means also I'll discuss that. So I'll talk about an acronym MIND, mind. So I'll tell the meaning of the verse once it comes and we'll recite it. So this verse is saying, okay, Uddhared. That is, Uddhared means to elevate. Atmana Atmanam. Elevate yourself with your mind. Let's recite this. Uddhared Atmana Atmanam.
Uddhared Atmana Atmanam.
Na Atmanam. Not. Avasadayet. Don't degrade yourself with the mind. Na Atmanam Avasadayet.
Atmanam Avasadayet.
Atmaivaya. Atma, certainly. Atmano Bandhur. That the mind is the friend of the self. Atmaivaya Atmano Bandhur.
Atmaivaya Atmano Bandhur.
Then Atmaiva, Ripu is enemy. Atmana. The mind can also be the enemy of the self. Atmaiva Ripuratmanaha.
Atmaiva Vipuratmanaha.
So let's recite this once and then we'll move forward. Uddharedatmanatmanam.
Uddharedatmanatmanam.
Natmanam avasadaye.
Avasadaye.
Atmaiva ya atmano bandhu.
Atmaiva Atmano Bandhur.
Atmaiva ripuratmanaha.
Atmaiva Vipuratmanaha.
So let's try to understand what this verse is saying. It's basically saying that there are two beings. There is I'll be using this as okay, you're able to see this?
Yes.
From there also?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, okay, there's the self and there is the mind. And what this verse is saying is that we will have a relationship with the self. Right? But what is the nature of that relationship? This is the self. We need to use basically this combination, the mind and the self. You need that light, I think, isn't it? You're able to see from there.
Yes.
Maybe some of you can come here if you're not able to see. You can see, okay. So this mind-self combination, it says that we need to elevate. And when we are elevating, at that time, the mind is acting like our friend. So the mind can be our friend, and at that time we can elevate ourselves. But conversely, what can also happen is that in this same combination, there's the self, there's the mind. Now, in this combination can be degraded, can go down, when we can harm ourselves. And when that happens, at that time the mind is acting like an enemy. So essentially, this verse is stating that there are two possibilities for how we function. That there is something inside us which we can use to rise up, or that same thing.
The blue color has to be changed.
Sorry?
The color
Can you
blue.
turn off the light?
The
Maybe
color
that will help us.
Okay, so only the black color is. The red
Maybe,
is also not
maybe we
visible.
can use yellow or something. Bright color, because the wall is also a little bit greenish and yellowish.
Okay, wait a minute. We had changed this.
Yeah, this is better. Now we can see.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Now it's better? Yeah. Can switch on the light also. Yeah, still it's good. Okay. Thank you for not being humble. Thank you for telling me there was a problem. Okay. So this particular nature, this you could say almost the bipolar kind of thing. The same thing inside us can be used to elevate, the same thing can be used to degrade. Now we all, broadly there are two kinds of people in the world. Some people are wise and some are otherwise. And it's not that there are two, you could say there are two kinds of people, but then it's also as if there are these two kinds of people inside us. It's almost as if we sometimes behave in a way that suppose, especially if we have to give advice to others, sometimes we surprise ourselves with the kind of gems of wisdom that come from our mouth. I'm so wise. And then, especially if we are provoked, if we are agitated, then we act in such ways that we can't even recognize ourselves. Who is this person? How could I have acted like that? So why does this happen? This is what the verse is talking about. So I said I'll use an acronym. You remember what acronym I said? Mind. So M-I-N-D. So the first aspect, now to understand the mind. The first point the Bhagavad Gita explains is the mind is material. Now what does this mean? That, and why is understanding this important? Basically, the Gita states that the self is three level. There is the physical side, that is the body. Then there is the mind. And then there is the spiritual side, it is the soul. So our existence is three level. And within this three level existence, the body can be compared to the hardware. The mind can be compared to the software. The soul can be compared to the user. So, in this understanding, if we consider the hardware, the software is much subtler than the hardware. We can say, okay, this is the hardware, this is the monitor, this is the keyboard, this is the touch screen, whatever. So we can touch the physical parts of the hardware. The software, we can't even touch it. We can say, okay, the software is located in this pen drive and I'm inserting the pen drive in my laptop. That's fine, but we're not touching the software, right? We're touching the hardware that contains the software. The software is subtle. And yet, if we consider the hardware and the software, they are of a different category from the user. The user is a conscious being. And the software and hardware are basically things. So, similarly, the body and the mind, they are both machines, they are material things. Whereas the soul is a spiritual being. The soul exists in a different category of existence. Now, some people, with respect to the mind, there are, if you consider understanding the mind, broadly there are two different theories, many, but two broad theories. One is that the mind is just non-existent. This is the materialistic view. That there was one materialist philosopher, he said that, I refuse to study the mind because it has no locus standi. You cannot find it. Where does it? There's the brain here, there's the heart here. Where is the mind? There's no such thing as a mind. So this is materialism. Now, it's not just materialism. It is let's say fanatical materialism, where gross physical matter is all that exists. Now, the same philosopher who said that, is a philosopher, is a philosopher. The sophistry of fools. He said that the mind does not exist, but around the age of 55 or something, he himself had to be admitted to a mental hospital because his mind went crazy. At that time, he couldn't deny that the mind existed. So, one extreme is to say that the mind doesn't exist at all. The other extreme is to say it is all that exists. That means you change your mind, everything will change. So, before I was introduced to the Bhagavad Gita and Bhakti, I used to read many self-help books and attend talks by various self-help teachers. So there's one particular teacher in India, his followers called him Shri Guruji. That is a common name for his. So he said that for the last 30 years, now every single day I smoke and I drink. And I don't have any heart problems, any blood pressure, no problem at all. Why? Because my mind is so strong. His mind is the only reality. If your mind is strong, you can do anything and nothing will happen to you. Now, he said that, and the next day he got a heart attack, and that was fatal. So, the mind is a reality, but the mind is not the only reality. In sports, sometimes the older player performs very well. And when I say age is just a state of the mind. Well, yes and no. A 45-year-old player can never play as well as a 25-year-old. That in most sports, A person who is 45 years old is probably like a dinosaur. And then we say age is only a state of mind because at that age, that function, that activity is so exceptional. So now, it's also the truth that if a person is constantly thinking, I have grown old, I have grown old, I have grown old, then that will aggravate their physical condition. So, the mind is one level of reality. So, one is that it is not real at all. The other is, it's the only reality. Whereas the Gita's understanding in the between, the mind is one among three levels of reality. It is one among three levels of reality. And it does have a significant effect on us. That sometimes people say, just think positive, everything will be wonderful for you. Well, yes and no. Positive thinking is good, but positive thinking, if somebody steps off from a 100-story building and says, I'll think positive. Well, you can think positive and then after you'll positively stop thinking. So, positive thinking is important. It cannot change everything. There is a physical reality and there are physical consequences of physical actions. So just as there is physical reality, the Gita explains that there is also a spiritual reality. So the mind exists in between. And because the mind is material, it is changeable. It's like our body. We can change the body to some extent. We can become healthier, we can become fitter. Sometimes nowadays when you use the word we can become healthier, you don't know what it means. Then somebody says you become healthier. Are you saying you gained weight or lost weight? What does it mean? So, but the idea is we can become fitter. Just like that, we can make our mind also fitter. So definitely, there is the possibility and even the necessity to improve our mind, to recreate our mind. But that begins with acknowledging that the mind plays one role, a vital role, but still one role in the way things work, in the way things function. So that is the first part, the mind. It's material. It's one level of reality among three levels of realities. What is the acronym we are discussing?
Mind.
Yes, thank you. So now I is instrumental. Instrumental means the mind is an instrument for the soul, for the self. Let me explain this. This is the soul. I'll separate the two over here. The soul, mind, body. And then beyond that there is the outer world. So now, in this outer world, from this outer world, stimuli come in. So the mind is the channel through which consciousness comes out. So this is consciousness. Consciousness is in Sanskrit called as Chaitanya. Consciousness is the energy of awareness and action. And consciousness comes from the soul. The soul is in one sense the root of consciousness. And the mind is the root of consciousness. The pathway for consciousness. So, from the soul, consciousness comes through the mind to the body and to the outer world. So, for example, I consider now I have a phone over here and this is a flashlight. This flashlight is like the soul. And now, if I put my hand like this, then I can't, the light is not seen. But if I put my hand like this, then is the light coming out now? I can't see it. Okay, you can. So this pathway through which the light is coming out, that is the mind. Now, if this is like this, then the light will not come out so much. If the light become like this, again the light will not come out so much. Just straight the light will come out. Because like this, the light will not come out at all. So like that, based on the state of our mind, the mind acts as an instrument for us by which two things happen. Information from the outside world comes in. I said consciousness. Consciousness can be defined many different ways, but I just use a functional understanding of consciousness. It is the energy of awareness and action. Through consciousness, we become aware of what is happening. And then we act. So both of these happen through the mind. So suppose we are talking with someone and we notice that person's eyes becoming a little glazed. And then we ask, Earth to you, which planet have you gone to come back now? So we often become absent-minded. For example, when we are hearing a talk, our mind goes for a walk. And then if there's some humor, the mind comes running back. Hey, what was the joke? I want to know the joke. So when this happens, exactly what is happening in terms of, see, the soul is here, the body is here, but the mind is somewhere here. So when this happens, the consciousness partly comes through here, but maybe most of the consciousness is going over here, into the mind. And that is when we are distracted. So the mind is an instrument, but that instrument sometimes, instead of acting properly, it acts out. It does not act properly, it can distract. Now, it can not only distract us in an extreme situation. The soul is here, the body and the outer world is over here. They show the body. And the mind is almost opposite. So then the consciousness, the energy, it doesn't know where to go. So when the mind and the body are completely at variance with each other, that state is technically called as insanity. Insanity means the physical reality and the mental experience are completely disconnected. India is a cricket mad country. So sometimes a big cricket tournament is going on. At that time you may see young people just walking on the streets and bowling or batting. Now there is no cricket pitch, there is no bowler, there is no batsman, but they are playing. So what's happening? Actually their mind is somewhere completely different from where their body is. That is not insanity, hopefully, but that is an indication. Sometimes when people have hallucinations, they say, I'm hearing some voice speaking, or they're speaking to someone, nobody is there at all. You start thinking, maybe this person is not mentally stable. So when we say mental health problems, essentially what is happening is there is a distortion of perception. The mind is our instrument for perception. We perceive things from the outer world into the inner world through the mind. And to the extent our perception gets distorted, to that extent we say that we or anyone else is mentally not sound. They're becoming mentally unhealthy. Now, the mind is an instrument. Its instrument in two ways. Its instrument as a transmitter. It's a transmitter and receiver. So transmitter means that the consciousness is transmitted through the mind to the outer world. And from the outer world, information comes in to the mind, and then that is presented to the soul. So in one sense, we could say in this role, the mind is like the control center of a building, of a high security building. Sometimes in high security buildings, you may have one center where there are maybe a dozen windows open, dozen computers with a dozen windows, and each of them is connected to one closed circuit TV. So at this door, at this window, at this parking lot, in this office, what's happening? And all of them can be seen simultaneously. So all that information is coming in. So our mind could be, in that sense, to be like this. It's like one big window in which there are many small windows open. So for example, right now, you are hearing this class. So while you are hearing this class, simultaneously there may be many other windows open. You're sitting on the floor and thinking, hey, this floor is not very comfortable. Or you might be thinking that, okay, so there is one window, is of eyes and the ears. Two windows, the eyes and the ears, through which you are hearing this talk, watching this being depicted. Then the second way, there's window of the touch. Okay, this is feeling too hard, the floor is too hard, maybe the temperature is too cold. Maybe there's the window of the tongue. Okay, what is there for food today? What is there for prasad? Then I'm going to have prasad. There are so many windows. These windows are not just coming from external sources. They come from external sources, but they also come from somewhere else. So these windows are all open. Now, imagine a big screen, multiple windows open, and then you press one screen, and then it zooms out. It fills the entire monitor. One window fills the entire monitor. So like that, for us, whichever thing we focus on, there are many inputs coming into us. Whatever we focus on, that zooms out. So this is the principle which Krishna talks about in 2.62, Dhyato Vichayan Pumsa, whatever we contemplate on. So we can say whatever gets our attention gets us. Whatever gets our attention gets us. Nowadays we live in what sociologists call the attention economy. Everybody is trying to catch everyone else's attention so that they can sell, they can buy, they can make a living, they can make money out of it. So our mind has multiple windows open, and whichever pops up, that moves forward, that zooms out. But the mind is a very special kind of monitor. I was in one of the top universities. Which university is very well known for AI in America? Any particular university?
Princeton, Harvard, Stanford.
Okay, Stanford. That is Stanford. Thank you. So they took me to a lab. So where they are doing the latest developments in AI. Maybe this also come out in some areas. See, normally if we are watching something on YouTube, and while you are watching something, there are maybe 5 other windows that are there nearby, suggested windows. So then, whichever we click on, that opens and starts playing. But this particular technology is such that while we are looking at, say, one video, the technology notices where our eyes are focusing. And if we say focus our eyes, we can decide the duration. So I'm watching one video, but if I focus my eyes on about 5 seconds on another thing, then immediately what happens? That window automatically opens up. And now you are watching that, again you look at something else for 5 seconds, that opens up. So here there is no need to even click. There is no click, but it will click in our mind. So it will completely captivate us. So our mind is like that. In our mind, there's many windows are open. We don't have to physically click anything. We just focus our attention on something, and immediately that will completely consume our mind. And now this is not a bad thing. From a functional perspective, the mind is a remarkable instrument. There are many ways in which there will be danger in life. Say for example, right now we are sitting and suddenly we start feeling something hot. Immediately our attention, is there a fire over here? And that attention is necessary. Because life can be dangerous, our bodies are fragile. So we need to be aware. So the capacity of one particular window to suddenly zoom out and to completely command our attention, that itself is not a bad thing. That is functionally very valuable, or it can be functionally very valuable, or even essential. However, the problem is not that one of the windows in the mind zooms out. The problem is that these windows seem to zoom out even when we don't want them to. We want to focus on one thing. We have some important work to do and we're focusing on our laptop, we're doing some work, and suddenly we get notification. Your friend has updated their Facebook profile photo. Okay, let me just look at it for 1 minute. You're reading some book. So what happens is people who can't people who can't face books find shelter in Facebook. So you get caught. And 1 minute becomes 10 minutes, 10 minutes becomes half an hour becomes 1 hour, this hours go by. So that now at least we click that. Notification came, but we click it. But sometimes it seems the sudden notifications also come and they start expanding also on their own. And this is where the mind seems to create a lot of trouble for us. But why does this happen? This brings us to the second part of the mind. I said mind is a transmitter and receiver, but the mind is also a recorder and repeater. Let me explain this. How many of you learned driving? Everybody had to learn driving, isn't it, sometime or other? So when we learn driving, initially it can be quite overwhelming. Okay, I have to look ahead, and I have to look at this window, I have to look at that window, I have to look at that window. Not window, look at that mirror, look at this mirror, look at that mirror, look at that mirror. Then I have to look at all these dials. Then I have to hold on to this wheel. Then I have to make sure that this leg is there, that leg is there. I have to press this leg, not press that leg. How do I manage all this? It can seem overwhelming initially. But we start driving, we practice. And after a few days or a few months, we can keep track of all those things. And at the same time, maybe we can hear some audiobook, we can have some meaningful conversation with others. So how does it happen? That's because the mind is a recorder and a repeater. The actions we do repeatedly, the mind records those actions. And then it enables us to repeat those actions. So as soon as we sit in a car, then immediately, okay, let my leg be here, let my hands be here. So that repetition happens automatically. If we wake up in the morning, we take a bath, we want to dress. We may have to spend a lot of time deciding which dress to wear. But we don't have to spend a lot of time thinking how to wear this dress. So that just happens automatically. So many of the things that we do regularly, the mind records those things and it repeats those things. So the mind, in one sense, contains the mind, if you say, this is the physical level, this is the mental level. So every action that we do, there is an outer result of that action. But along with that outer result, there is an inner result. And the inner result of that action is that an impression is formed inside us. And that impression leads to a proposition. So impression is samskar, proposition is probability. And that proposition leads to the repetition of the action. So every action, there is impression, from impression comes proposition, proposition leads to repetition of action. And when the repetition is there, again, there is outer, but let's focus on the internal right now. There's an internal result. What is that? Now, the previous impression that was there gets doubled. A new impression is formed. And this goes on and on and on. Eventually, the impressions may become so deep that the distance between, so the proposition happens and immediately repetition happens. It's instantaneous. We don't even think about it. So this is how the mind forms impressions. It's a repeater and it's a recorder. It's a recorder and a repeater. The impression, actions that we have done, repeated actions we have done, they're recorded, and then the repetition is aided for us. So that is how many of the mechanical tasks that we do, they become easier for us. Right now you are hearing a talk. Now I am speaking different words, I am pronouncing those words, you are hearing the words, you are hearing the pronunciation, and you are able to make sense of what I am saying. How is it? Because the mind is stored. Okay, these are the words, these are the meanings of those words, these are the sounds for those words, and all the sounds and meanings are coming together. That's how comprehension is happening. So here when I am using the word mind, I am using it to refer to the entire subtle body. In some frames of analysis, mind includes they are differentiated, but I won't go into that. It just makes things a little more complicated. So now, this is the instrumental part. From the instrument's perspective, the mind is invaluable for us. Sometimes some people become senile, or some people develop something like Alzheimer's. They say they lost their mind. That means the normal thing that we do easily, they just don't know what to do. So there is no record and there is no easy repetition. A person has become senile, or a person has developed Alzheimer's, and they go to the restroom and they don't know what to do in the restroom. So there is the recording is not there, the repeating is not happening. So from that perspective, the mind is important for us. That's why in this verse of Krishna is saying that elevate yourself with your mind. He's not saying get rid of your mind and elevate yourself alone. No? Some people think that elevation means what? Like I started this over here. That this is the self is here and the mind is here. So we could put it another ways. Now Krishna is saying both of these need to be elevated upwards. But sometimes what we think is, okay, I will go here and I'll kick my mind down. And in this way I'll get rid of the mind. But if we try to do this, this will only lead to an unbearable stretch. That we will feel conflicted constantly. Say, we want to do a particular thing, but our mind doesn't agree with that. So if this is the way we try to stretch ourselves, and internally I feel one thing, externally I act completely different. Now, we can't continue that for very long. The more we stretch, the greater the distance between the mind and the self, the greater will be the tension inside. And eventually, there will be a collapse. And the collapse won't be that the mind will be pulled up, rather the self will be pulled down. So the elevation is, if this is the particular level, now it's not that the mind is pushed up, it's not that the mind is pushed down and the self is pushed up. Rather what Krishna is telling is, that if this is the level we are at, from here, both the soul and the mind, they need to be elevated together. So, elevate yourself with your mind. So this brings me to the third part of what we're discussing. Now, if all this seems very technical and complex, don't worry. It's only going to become more complex. Well, it will, but it will become easier also. So, what is the third acronym we're discussing? Third is the acronym N. Now, this is important to listen. Mind is neutral. Neutral means sometimes we feel, and there are many things I don't want to do, and yet we end up doing those things. There was one, I think Oscar Wilde, he said that giving up smoking is the easiest thing in the world. I have done it over 100 times. So I gave up smoking, but smoking didn't give me up. That means I raise myself up, but the mind is still having that same programming, those same impression. The mind keeps propositioning again. And we keep doing the same things. So when we start thinking, the mind makes me do things which I don't want to do. It makes me overeat, it makes me oversleep, it makes me get angry, it makes me jealous. So we start thinking, why is the mind like this? I hate the mind. Well, the mind is not bad. the mind is not our enemy. What is inside the mind can be our enemy. The impressions that are there in the mind, they can be our enemy. So to understand that, let's take a simple example. Suppose somebody visited a particular website. Have any of you heard of this? Bollywood? Who has not heard of it, isn't it? So suppose somebody visited a particular website called Bollywood.com. They visited once, twice, thrice, 4 times, 5 times, maybe 100 times. And then as soon as they type B in their browser, what happens? Bollywood.com becomes autocomplete. Now suppose they come to a spiritual program like this, and they hear about the Bhagavad Gita. And they say, it's interesting, I want to know more about Bhagavad Gita. So they open their device, they go to the browser and want to type Bhagavad Gita. They type B, and what happens?
Bollywood.com.
Bollywood.com comes. They didn't want to go there. Now, is the browser their enemy? No. The browser is simply making repeated tasks easier. But now, what we want to do has changed. So the browser is neutral. Similarly, our mind is neutral. What we have done in the past, the mind will just make it easy for us to do those things. But sometimes our values change. They say, oh, that thing which I was doing earlier, I don't want to do it. Maybe in the past we spent a lot of time watching TV. Now maybe you want to hear some kirtan, maybe hear some spiritual wisdom, maybe read some books. We want to do something more meaningful. But as soon as we have leisure time, immediately our mind will say, okay, let's watch it. So the mind is not the enemy. What is inside the mind can be the enemy. The mind is neutral. Suppose the same person, now they type bhagavad.com and go to Bhagavad Gita. They do it once, twice, thrice, 4 times, 10 times, 20 times. Then eventually, what will happen is, if they type B, what will come? Bhagavad.com. So the mind is neutral. And understanding is very important because sometimes we may think of the mind as the enemy. But even if the mind were considered to be enemy, we have to live with our mind. There is no substitute mind that we can get suddenly. This is the mind which we have, and which is what we will have to have lifelong, not just lifelong, maybe in future lives also. So the mind goes with the body to the next life. So when we understand this is neutral, what we need to at least do is, in our relationship with our mind, we could say, first, there is obedience. This obedience is not that the mind obeys us, we obey the mind. Right? With whatever the mind proposes, we just do it. We unthinkingly do it. From obedience, gradually, we go towards vigilance. Vigilance means we observe. Okay, what's happening? Like our phone, say sometimes there are 100 notifications on the phone. And sometimes whatever notification comes up, we immediately click on it. But then we'll not be able to get anything done. So what do? We choose. Okay, this notification, I want to know this. This notification, I'll open it. So vigilance means we are evaluating. Okay, what to focus on, what to not focus on. And then eventually, we will move toward transcendence. I'll explain what transcendence means shortly. But at least, so when we are simply obeying the mind, at that time the mind can act like an enemy. The relationship can be a hostile relationship. When we are vigilant, we have a working relationship. I was at a mediation and one person said, between 2 people, I was trying to facilitate that. The first person said, as soon as they went, I don't trust you. The second person said, I returned the favor. So I also don't trust you. I said, that's good. So both of you have an equal foundation. Both of you don't trust each other, still both of you have come here now. So, because you don't have to trust each other, you want to have a working relationship. And working relationship means that trust will have to be earned. The fact that despite not trusting each other, you have come here means that you want at least some level of a working relationship. So like that, we can't unthinkingly trust our mind. At the same time, we can't reject or crush our vigilance. Now from vigilance, gradually the mind will become transformed. And when the mind becomes transformed, that is where the relationship becomes a friendly relationship. And so what Krishna is telling is, don't go in this direction. If you go back to the original words, Krishna says, don't go in this direction. So he said, go in this direction. He said, elevate yourself with your mind. So the mind is neutral, and we can get the mind to work for us instead of against us. The key is repetition. Repetition. So in a browser, we can just simply delete the history, and all the past autocomplete will go away. It doesn't go away, we think it goes away. Google still stores everything. But at least for us it seems to go away. In our mind there is no delete button. Whatever impressions are there, they are there. So they are there. You know, the Sanskrit word is samskar. You've heard this word, everyone? So you can translate this into English as samskar. Everyone has some or the other scar. And everybody is scarred in some way or the other. There are issues that everyone has. But that doesn't mean that defines us. The mind is neutral. When the mind is good, there is bad. And the key to transforming the mind is, as I said, repetition. And that brings me to the last part of the discussion. What is the last word in the acronym? D. So D is devotional. Now what do I mean by devotional? See, the mind, my mind is not devotional at all. It runs away from devotion. Well, yes and no. It may run away from devotion to Krishna, but the mind is naturally devotional towards something or the other. Somebody might be devoted to cricket, somebody might be devoted to music, somebody might be devoted to politics. Our mind often has an attraction or infatuation to things that goes beyond the rational. And that very tendency can be used in bhakti. It can get used to transform us in bhakti. Our mind is even right now devoted to something. Maybe it's devoted to money, maybe it's devoted to our own looks, maybe it is devoted to our... When I use the word devoted, I'm using it in a generic sense. What do I mean by devotion? Whenever the devotion is there towards something, then if devotion is there, thoughts flow naturally, thoughts flow effortlessly. So whatever we are devoted to, if you want to understand what our mind is devotional towards, right, you can think of, what do we think of when we have nothing to think of? Where does our mind go? It all goes. It may go toward the family, it may go toward children, it may go toward this, it may go toward that. It goes somewhere or the other. And this is based on the conditionings of the impressions within the mind. In that direction, the mind will go right now. But what bhakti does is that bhakti yoga helps us redirect our mind. It has a tendency to be devotional. What the Gita says is that everything attractive comes from a spark of Krishna's attractiveness. And therefore, rather than rejecting, oh, why am I attracted to this thing? Understand? So people say this is an ocean. And now from the ocean, various drops have sprinkled at various places. So now these drops have come from the ocean. So if I am here right now, Now all the drops have come from the ocean. But all the drops won't take me toward the ocean. If we pursue this drop, then we will drop eventually. We will go away from the ocean and we will go into a desert. There is no water and we will drop. But if we pursue this drop, we are coming closer and closer to the ocean. So all the drops come from the ocean, but all the drops don't take us to the ocean. Similarly, the Gita states that everything attractive comes from ocean. Whatever it is, we could say that. We think of three things. Say there is alcohol. Prabhupada says in Krishna book that, and on the way to Krishna book that the taste of alcohol is actually coming from Krishna. Now, he says if somebody cannot give up drinking alcohol, they're drinking, but they think that this taste comes from Krishna. By thinking like that, one day they will become devoted to Krishna. Prabhupada is not saying by drinking alcohol they will become devoted to Krishna. No. Okay, they are drinking, but while drinking, they are thinking of Krishna. Then what will happen is the thinking of Krishna will connect them. So we could say alcohol, that is in tamoguna. Then we could have, say, wealth. Somebody thinking about wealth, that could be, they want a lot of money. It's in rajoguna, in the mode of passion. Somebody might think of nature. Oh, I like to go to beautiful natural sites, sit and feel peaceful. Look at the vastness of the universe. Feel a sense of wonder. But that may not be directly devotional. When an atheist can feel that sense of peace and wonder. But that is bringing you closer to Krishna. So our mind's devotion, our mind's immediate attraction may be through various things right now. So what we do, Bhakti Yoga, the process of Bhakti Yoga does two things. We want to recreate our mind, essentially it means we want to change the impressions in the mind. And the previous point I made was repetition. And if we just repeat, my Bollywood.com is a complete, just make it, visit Bhagavita.com, gradually, Ruka.com will come up. So if you want to develop a healthy habit, just focus on repeating the healthy habit. And repetition will itself recreate. But here, we're talking about something different. Here, it's not so much repetition as redirection. Redirection means that whatever it is that we are attracted to, we try to see how that can be connected to Krishna. Not everything that we are attracted to presently can be connected to Krishna, but many things can be. So when I conclude with this point here, that suppose the things we feel good doing. That means our mind is devoted to them. I'm using the word devoted in the sense synonym to attached. It's naturally going to work. Things we feel good doing. And things that are good for us. Now, if these two circles were identical, life would be so easy. If all the tasty food were also healthy, we could enjoy so much. But now these two circles don't overlap. They're not identical. But that doesn't mean that they are not at all overlapping. There are some areas where they do overlap. And finding that area is critical. If you can find that area and we use that area, we leverage that area, we can grow better. So, suppose somebody likes music, there are many different kinds of music. But if they like music and they also know that say Bhakti is good for it, Krishna is good for it, then they try to find devotional music. That could be the intersection. So while in Bhakti, the previous point of repetition, in repetition, we have our regular Bhakti practices. We have our sadhana. So we chant the holy names. We study scripture, we worship the deities, whatever things that we do, by which we change the impressions in the mind. That is important. But apart from that, or in addition to that, we try to look for something that we are naturally attracted to. And then we try to connect that impression. To the extent we can find even one area like that. To that extent, changing our mind will become much easier. Because here, we won't have to fight against the mind. There are times when we need to fight against the mind, no doubt. But if that is all that we have to do constantly, then that is not going to work. Just to elaborate this point, now we all do many different kinds of activities, the spectrum of activities we do. So among the major spectrum of activity that we do, there are some activities that we like doing. They give us strength. When we do them, we feel energized. And there are some activities that take strength. This is just like people. I was at one person's house and they had a quote on their wall. All our guests make us happy. Some by arriving and some by departing. So like that, we all have this. Some people, as soon as they come, a big smile comes on our face. We look forward to being with them. But there are some people, as soon as they come, it's like the smile goes on strike. Even if we want to, a smile doesn't come on our face. We feel as if all the oxygen from the room has been just taken away. And then we feel as if we are walking on minefields. And somehow that person goes, we feel a sigh of relief. So there are people like that. Now the second category of people, we can't avoid them. We may try to minimize the association, but we'll always find some people who fall the same. The key to maintaining our social balance is to ensure that the interactions of the people in the second category, and people who take our strength, that is not far more than the interaction of people who give us strength. So we could say, strengthening interactions. We need to ensure that for us in our life, the strengthening interactions, they are greater than the exhausting interactions. And what applies to interactions also applies to actions. So for us, when we try to change our mind, there are some things which are good for us, and we know they are good for us, but they just don't feel good for us. So we push ourselves and try to do it. And that discipline is required. Like we discussed repetition, we keep repeating, things will change. But if we always have to fight against ourselves, we get exhausted. By fight against ourselves, I mean fight against our mind. But if we learn to find some activity that give us strength, and the activity they give us strength and they are good for us. In the Bhakti tradition, the word used for this is Uddipan. Uddipan is a spiritual stimulus, something which draws our attention, our attraction towards the Lord, towards that which is higher in our lives. And that will make our transformation much, much easier. That will give us the inner balance. We won't feel internally exhausted in trying to change ourselves. And once we find this, then we can find that everything that we do, it will become so much more effective. Now presently our situation is, we want to do one thing and our mind opposes that thing. So what happens is maybe this fighting against the internal, maybe we function at maybe 50% level, maybe 15% level, who knows. We are all functioning far below our potential. Like if a machine has a lot of friction, then most of the energy of the machine gets exhausted in the friction. So for us, there is a friction between us and our mind. And because of that, Sometimes we wake up and there's something we have to do which we just dread doing. Then, even before half the day is over, we are already exhausted. Although we're not done much, but our mind has been, the friction with the mind is exhausting. But as we change our mind through repetition and redirection, what will happen is the same mind. At one level, no, it will just get out of the way. We will just be able to function without any inner opposition. This itself is the big positive, if this happens. But what can happen is even better. So this is good when this happens, but what can be even better is that if we are here, the mind is here, and what we want to do, the mind also wants to do the same thing. The mind takes us ahead. And that happens, we cannot imagine how much more empowered we can become in everything that we do now. So when our mind becomes our friend, the amount of good that we can do, how good we can become and how much good we can do, that discovering that itself could be the biggest adventure of our life. And it is that adventure that Bhakti Yoga invites us to. Bhakti Yoga is not just about worshipping the Lord and forgetting the world. It is about worshipping the Lord, transforming our mind, and then playing our part in transforming the world. That is how recreating the mind is the inside-out way for recreating the world. We change ourselves internally and we play a part in being a positive change externally. I'll summarize. I discussed 4 points based on an acronym. What was M? Material. So what I meant was that the mind is, there are 2 extreme ideas about the mind. One is that it doesn't exist at all, and the other is that it's the only thing that exists. When we discuss the Gita's understanding is that 3 levels of reality are there. There is the body, mind, and soul. So, but the mind is like the software. It is material. It is subtle. It is different from us. So understanding that it's material means that it is different, and it is for us to elevate ourselves, not degrade ourselves. That was the key meaning of the words. Then, what was I? Instrumental. Yes. So the mind is an instrument for us for 2 things. On one side, it's an instrument for the transmitter and receiver. Yes. The consciousness goes outward, and information from outside comes inwards, like the control center of a big device, big high security room. And so also it is what? Recorder and repeater. So many things everything that we do, it gets recorded, and things that are done repeatedly, they are recorded much more forcefully, we can say, impactfully, and then reordering them, repeating them becomes very easy. So that's how, say, we learn driving or do things which require attention, but we can do them without needing to pay too much attention. The mind is a vital instrument for us. N was neutral. The mind is not our enemy. What is inside the mind is our enemy. So if somebody thought in the past, oh, whenever I have some time, I just want some entertainment, so I'll go to Bollywood.com. That's where they went. But now they feel that, okay, I don't want to spend so much time on entertainment. I want some enlightenment. I want to go to Bhagavad-gita.com. The mind will still go to Bollywood, not because it's our enemy, or rather the browser will go to the Bollywood.com. It's really our mind will go to the things which we thought we were doing previously. But if we understand the mind is neutral, then we understand the key for changing the mind is simply repetition. So don't worry if we're not changing. If I go to 100 times, I go to Bhagavad-gita.com and still Bollywood.com is coming as autocomplete. All that it means is, maybe I visited Bollywood.com 10,000 times. Doesn't matter. I can't change what I had done in the past, but I just keep doing the right thing now. Then that repetition is going to change the mind. That is why we do our bhakti practices repeated. Sometimes we feel attracted, sometimes we don't feel attracted. Sometimes we feel a change happening, sometimes we don't feel a change happening. Doesn't matter. Just repetition can transform the mind over time. And the last was devotional. Now devotional, I meant in the inclusive sense that whatever the mind is attracted to, ultimately When I was talking about that, all the drops come from the ocean, like that everything attractive is a spark of Krishna. So we understand that intellectually and then we contemplate, okay, this sport, this movie, this activity, that gives me pleasure. And our mind gets so attracted to it. And that's just a drop. And Krishna is the ocean. How much more pleasure will there be in that? So if you understand that, then we focus on redirection. Yes, presently I may be attracted to this, but I want to be attracted toward Krishna. And for this redirection, we find the intersection point between the things we feel good doing and the things that are good for us. And from that point, we can gain strength while transforming ourselves. Sometimes repetition may take strength because we don't feel much taste or joy in it. But redirection, if you are working in this area, this will give us strength. And that's how we can function. And once our mind stops opposing us, even if the mind gets out of the way, friction inside will decrease. But if the mind starts going our way, then we can become much more empowered in everything that we do in our life. We can do so many more good things and we can become far better, so much more good beings. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments? Yes,
It seems sometimes we have to disregard the mind and act. And the thing that comes to my mind about this is the chanting of japa. Because the mind, I've been chanting japa a few years, more than most people have been in their bodies. And my mind still is not attracted to chanting the Maha Mantra. So I try to ignore it. But the problem is, sometimes it's a fight. My mind wants to think what I have to do for the day. No, don't think about that. Yes, think about that. No, I'm not chanting japa, I'm just arguing my mind. So sometimes I have to ignore it. Any guidance in this one area where our mind is, because it says in the Bhagavad Gita, the mind is the chief agent driving us in the material world. So here's the crux of the fight to get out of the material world, japa. So any magic wand for in the question of the mind and japa?
So the mind gets distracted, especially when we are trying to chant, and we are told to neglect it, but it's difficult. Yes. See, neglect is like, I want to type bhagavad-gita.com. As soon as I type B, Bollywood.com has come. But I neglect that and keep typing Bhagavad Gita. But sometimes it may happen that I type B and then I get distracted and Bollywood.com comes and it goes to Bollywood.com. Now if it goes there, what do? Okay, I didn't want to go there. Maybe initially we just get caught in it. Okay, hey, but I didn't want to go here. And as soon as we realize, okay, we bring ourselves back. So in the Gita, Krishna says that yato nishchalati, wherever the mind wanders, bring it back. So the mind may stray away. The autocomplete may happen because of the past impressions. Let it not stay away. What this means is that the mind gets distracted. Don't overreact to the distraction. It's not, oh, I'm such a terrible person, I'm useless, I have no taste. No. Actually, okay, got distracted, doesn't matter. Just that's a functional thing. It's just the functionality. That's why when I said the mind is neutral, it's sometimes helpful to see the mind as mechanical and not as moral. Moral means that we are evaluating, oh, my mind went over there, I'm such a terrible devotee. I got this kind of desire, what kind of horrible person am I? Well, maybe not. There are times when the moral evaluations are required, but there are times, as long as our intentions are strong, I don't want to go in that direction. Then if I I don't want to do that thing, but still I'm getting that result. I'm getting so then just see it mechanically. That's what I had done in the past, and that's why it's coming as a repetition. We don't have to beat ourselves down by saying, oh, I'm a terrible person. It's a mechanical functioning. Just, okay, I didn't want to go to Bollywood, but I went there. That doesn't make me a bad person. Let me come back again. So by this, what will happen is, say suppose we want to go towards Krishna, but our mind strays away. Sometimes when it strays away, it just keeps straying away. But the mind may stray away and we get it back. It may stray away again, we get it back. It strays away again. But if we keep doing this, over a period of time, it will start staying. It is staying on the path to Krishna. So it just takes patience. And sometimes it's helpful to have something which will bring the mind back also. So the sound of the holy name itself, say for example, this is the point of concentration. That is the sound of the holy name. Now that's what we would like to focus on while chanting. Now this is difficult to focus on because after all we don't really perceive the sound to be non-different from Krishna. So it's a sound, I'm repeating it again and again and again. How do I focus? So around that sound we can create some kind of circle of concentration. This specifically is the point of concentration. But the circle of concentration means, okay, are there some things related to Krishna that fall in my circle of things I like doing and things that are good for me? So maybe I like a particular pastime of Krishna. And keep a picture of that pastime. If you read some quote, some words about the power of the holy name, about the nature of the mind, keep that in front. We don't want to focus constantly on that. We would like to focus on the holy name. But what we are trying to do here is, if the mind goes away like this, it just goes away somewhere, far, all over the universe. But instead, if we have the circle of concentration, the mind goes like this, oh, it comes back. It basically comes back. It goes, it comes back. That's also, okay, my mind, I can't focus on the holy name. Oh, this is the picture of Krishna. This is Krishna saving Draupadi. And it is the same Krishna that I am calling when chanting the holy names. Oh, let me think about Krishna. Let me focus on Krishna. So like that, we have the circle of concentration. And that's how we can try to, while we neglect the mind, we also are redirecting the mind. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Prabhu, you mentioned about body, mind, soul, and consciousness. Is there a way you can elaborate it? I came in a bit late actually. So, like, what is soul and what is consciousness, and how does that impact, the whole cleaning up of the soul that we talk about, the layers that have been accumulated?
Okay.
Is this the way that you keep focus
Yeah,
on?
so the mind is, so the soul is the source of consciousness. The soul is unchanging. We don't clean the soul. We clean the consciousness. The soul is always pure. Even now, each of our soul is completely pure, completely divine, is a part of the divine. But the soul's consciousness is currently contaminated because of the various conditionings in the mind, because of the default direction in which it goes. So what we right now do is, we try to redirect the consciousness toward constructive things, toward healthy things. Once we do that, we will find that the consciousness will become pure. So if you just focus on consciousness of Krishna, then the object of consciousness, whatever we are focusing on, that will become the content of consciousness. And as the content of consciousness changes, we become pure. Does that answer your question? Yes, bro.
say that we have a body, and so the Supreme Lord also has a body. Is Supreme Lord is not Nirakar. We have a soul, and the Lord also is super soul, and we are soul. So similarly, we have a mind. Does the Lord have a mind as well? Is a question that actually was asked.
Does the Lord have a mind? Well, yes, definitely. In the spiritual world, the body, mind and soul, everything is spiritual. So in that sense, in terms of, when we talk about the various aspects of a person, like the body, mind, soul. Now, if you talk about them, in the material world, these three are completely different. Body, mind and soul are three different things. In the spiritual world, all three of them are spiritual. So then, in terms of constitution, if you consider in the spiritual domain, in terms of constitution or composition, there is no difference at all. Angani ase sakalendra vritti. And Krishna can eat through his eyes. But normally speaking, Krishna does not eat through his eyes. When Mother Yashoda has to give food to Krishna, she doesn't give food to his eyes. She gives food for him to eat through his mouth. So, in terms of constitution composition, there is no difference between all of these. But in terms of function or relation, that means he is functioning in various relationships, there is a difference. So Krishna, does he have a mind? Yes, he thinks. The mind is a tool for thinking. Does Krishna think? Of course he thinks. But his mind is not material, just as his body is not material. Okay. And last question before we stop.
Hare Krishna, thank you for the class. I felt like I'm in a neuroscience class. So I'm very new to Krishna consciousness. Part of my brain thinks that this is very, kind of useful and then helps. But other part of my mind thinks that, because I'm an experimental scientist, that, oh, this cannot be true, this cannot be real. And then one biggest problem is that when I go to work, it's I work with all of the scientists around me, and then I cannot talk about, because I feel like I'm living two parallel worlds, just stepping out of this world into the other world, and then again to this world. So is there any way to, basically slowly make a connection between these two worlds?
How do we make a connection between the scientific and the spiritual? Well, there are two different aspects. You consider science and spirituality. See, there is what is called as ontological. Ontological refers to the nature of what exists. And then there is the functional. Functional means how things work. So, as far as the ontological aspect is concerned, does the soul really exist? Does the God really exist? No, for science to determine that is going to take a long time. And I'll explain, if we have time, I'll explain why. But the point is that my device is reminding me I'm going over time now. So, from the functional perspective, people are, even scientifically minded people are actually being very open to spirituality. Say, for example, the positive effects of meditation, mindfulness. Even there are some researchers who have done some studies on mantra chanting. They have found it quite helpful. That now we can have some neurological explanation that generally when a person is distracted, there is a lot of cross noise between the neurons. I mean, the neuronal firings are happening in such a way, instead of getting us to focus on one thing, they're cross-firing basically, cross-firing. And that decreases when somebody hears some soothing music, when somebody does some meditation. And that's why people feel calm, people feel focused. So now that is something which they've observed happens. Now, why does that happen exactly? The the ontological rationale, the philosophical rationale for that they're not aware. And there's difference of opinion. The mainstream body of scientists are largely materialistic, but many of them are simply functionally materialistic. They are not like fanatically materialistic. So this is what we are studying. This is the domain of our study. This is what we focus on. But from the functional perspective, if something else works, scientists are also open to that. Somebody may be very rational in their approach for studying science, but if they are feeling stressed, they may do some meditation and mindfulness, and they feel peaceful. They're ready to use that. So while it is understandable that they feel that we have two categories. No, I'm living two lives. Like I'm a scientist and then I'm a spiritualist, or I'm going to be a spiritualist, whatever. So thinking like that, we can think that we are at least at our level of realization. We are human beings, and we are searching for wisdom. We are searching for meaning. We are searching for finding something of value, and doing something of value in our life. So science and spirituality, we can see them as two distinct avenues. They're both resources for us. So where science makes sense for us, we use that. Where spirituality makes sense, we use that. And are there some areas where they may disagree? Yes, there are. But overall, they have two different domains. And the way I put it is, science is the study of matter. And that study is extremely powerful in terms of the way it has transformed the world around us. Technology and the other. The spirituality is the study of what matters. What is really important in life. Science cannot tell us that exactly. What should be the priority of things in life? What are the values I should live by? What are the purposes I should live by? So the two have different domains. When Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, when Arjuna sought knowledge from Krishna, Arjuna was not seeking scientific knowledge. In the sense that Arjuna was not seeking knowledge of how to better control the world. At that time, he had those resources to do that. He was an expert archer. But he was going to understand what matters most. Okay, what is my duty right now? What is the choice that will bring meaning to my life, or at least restore some meaning to my life? And it seems to be lost. If you consider Srimad Bhagavatam, when that is spoken to King Parikshit, who is about to die in 7 days. At that time, Parikshit Maharaj is not interested primarily in scientific knowledge. So, he's interested in focusing on how to make my life most meaningful in the last 7 days. And it is that wisdom that is important. So, I conclude this with the same incident, same phenomena can have multiple explanations. So for example, right now I'm feeling cold. It could be because I have a fever. It could be because maybe the AC is right behind me. It could be because I'm from India and I'm not acclimatized to this weather. There could be multiple reasons for the same thing. So now, what is the most constructive focus for me? If right now I'm giving a talk and I'm feeling cold, I've got fever, okay, let me take something. There's the AC, switch off the AC. If I am from India, well, I can't do anything, I just wear some warm clothes. So we have to adjust to what is the most constructive approach to dealing with this. So when I just, for 1 month I was in London before I came to America. So I had gone to Cambridge University for giving a talk. On the way we passed by the place where Newton is said to have seen the apple fall. Some people say saw it fall, some people say it fell on him. He felt it fall. But either way, that place is still preserved and it's considered to be like a pilgrimage place for scientists. They go there and meditate. How brilliant Newton was. It was a simple incident like a fall of an apple. He came up with a theory of that. And yes, that is his brilliance. We all can take inspiration from that. At the same time, Newton, he believed in God. He believed in God, and he saw that his scientific insights, his scientific discoveries, were like spiritual insights into how God had fashioned the universe. So when he saw the apple falling, and he asked what made the apple fall. At that time, he was not interested. God made the apple. That may be true. That is true ultimately, but that was not the level of explanation that he was interested. So science studies, because the same event, science studies from the mechanical perspective. Every event can have a mechanical explanation, but there can be non-mechanical explanations also. So events can be explained at multiple levels. Science explains things at a particular level. Spirituality explains things at another level. And rather than thinking that, you say, I am a living being here, and say, science goes in this direction and spirituality goes in this direction, which direction should I go? Rather than thinking like that, we are one living being and we all want to live a meaningful life. And for living meaningfully, science is one part, spirituality is more than a part, it's more like a resource. This is one resource and another resource. So whichever resource helps us, we use that. And if there are places where the two seem to be pulling in opposite directions, then we consult some experts. There are specific areas where the overlap is there, or conflict is there, we can explore those. But overall, the two serve different purposes, and both are valuable. Science helps us to, in one sense, better manage the outer world. Spirituality helps us to better manage the inner world. Thank you very much. The Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Jai Gaur Premanand. Yeah, so much of what I spoke today is from my latest book. This is You Are Not Your Mind, You Are Better. This is 64 reflections on the Bhagavad Gita based on the mind. The kind of simple diagrams I was drawing. There are figures like this for each article. There are 64 articles based on various verses from the Gita. And each article is just 2 pages, so you can easily read it. And there are questions ranging from what is the mind and consciousness and soul, or why does our mind seem to work against us? How can we manage the mind in such a way that it cooperates with us? How does Bhakti transform our mind? Questions like that are answered in this book. And then this is wisdom from the Ramayana on life and relationships. We have about 20 articles based on various incidents, key incidents from the Ramayana. So they address questions like, is everything destined? What is the nature of duty? So for example, when Dashrath exiled Ram accepted as destiny. But when Sita was abducted, Ram did not accept that as destiny. So when do we accept things? When do we try to change things? How does our mind sometimes trick us? How Manthara would trick to Kaikeyi? How can we avoid that from happening? That's its practical life lessons from the Ramayana. I explained in this book. And this is 365 quotes inspired by the Bhagavad Gita. Each of them is based on one verse. So related to our topic today, be mindful or your mind will make you a fool. So there is, issues don't cause fights, people with issues do. So this is inspired by Bhagavad Gita 1.1 right away. So there are many quotes like this. When fear accelerates your imagination, let faith become the brake. So each of these is a quote inspired by one verse. It's 365 quotes are available. It's a year-independent calendar. It can be used for different years. And if you Google this, you will find that each of these has a article explaining the quote, but even without it explaining, the quote is self-explanatory. And it's also a gift that you can give to people who may not want to read books. They can just look at some wisdom. So all of these are available over there, and if you want, I'm also available for a short while. I can sign the books also. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.